welcome to my channel. My name is Venus and today I am doing my most disappointing, my worst reads, and all of the books that I DNFed in 2023. I'm going to do it the same way that I did it last year. I'm going to talk about my top 10 worst, most disappointing books in the beginning, and then at the end I'm going to do a rapid fire for all of the books that I DNFed. So get comfortable and let's get started. Quick disclaimer, if you liked any of these books, I'm sorry. These are obviously just my opinion. I know how it feels though because I just watched one of my favorite booktubers do her worst of 2023 and a couple of my favorite books were on her list. So I feel you. I know what it's like. So I apologize in advance. I'm going to start with book number 10, and that is The Midnight Club by Christopher Pike. This book was marketed so coolly to make me think that I was going to read something very creepy and hopefully gory, and I did not get any of that. So this book is about a group of teenagers who are suffering from terminal illnesses. They are living in a hospice, and they have created this group called the Midnight Club where they get together every night at midnight and talk about like different ghost stories, and I don't know, they all just make up their own little stories that they share with each other. The premise states that whichever one passes away first is going to try to make some kind of contact from the other side to the ones that are still living. So I'm like, oh, we've got some supernatural things happening, hopefully, which I love. And no, that didn't happen at all. This book was depressing. It was sad, and I don't even know why I finished it, but don't go into it thinking you're gonna get a nice creepy book, because you're not. It's gonna be super depressing. Yes, that one I was very disappointed with. Although I hear the show is good, and I still haven't watched it, but I hear the show is good because I think they do put in creepy things into it. I mean, yeah, I expected there to be some kind of sadness. They're living in hospice, they have terminal illnesses, but I thought I was gonna get something creepy from the other side. Didn't happen. What the heck? Number 9, Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. This was a novella. Fonda Lee is the author of the Greenbone Saga trilogy, which is one of my favorite fantasy trilogies of all time. So I was very excited. I actually got an arc of this novella, could not wait to read it, and I read it and I was incredibly bored. So in this book we are following, I think her name is Esther. Part of her family are murdered by these like monsters called manticores, and so she ends up at a ruck riding school situation or training place where there's these giant rocks or bird of prey that are specifically trained, or I think they're specifically trained, I can't remember, but to kill these manticores. So Esther is very excited to be able to do this because she wants to get revenge on, you know, these monsters killing her family, which premise sounds fantastic, but it was boring. It was very boring. The coolest thing about it was, and it's sad to say, was when the manticores, you know, were doing their thing, and then outside of that, I was just incredibly bored. We spent a lot of time with her, you know, learning to bond with her ruck, and I think it ended up being some kind of little romance situation that wasn't really entertaining. So yes, very disappointed in Untethered Sky. I was super bummed about that one. Number 8 is Tastes Like Candy by Ivy Tholen. This is a teen slasher set in a carnival that I thought was going to be so fun and exciting to read, and while parts of it was, the writing was pretty good. The kills were very unique. I mean, for being in a carnival, the author did come up with some very unique kills, but the female teenagers that were written for this book, their characters were so annoying, and I could not stand any of them. And then the ending was a super letdown when you find out who the killer is. When that's revealed, it was such a lame motive that I was so bummed about that. I am gonna try to read another Ivy Tholen book because, like I said, overall her writing was very good. Otherwise I wouldn't have finished it, but the teens that she wrote in this book were so irritating. So the premise, if you're curious, is a group of teenagers, female teenagers, who are getting ready to be seniors, and they're given like this scavenger hunt from the exiting teenagers for this carnival at night while it's closed, to go in it and find these different things, and at the end, you know, you bring it back or whatever. And so they do that, and then they start getting picked off one by one, and then you find out who it is at the end, and it was just huge letdown. So very disappointed in that one. Next up is another novella, The Scourge Between Stars by Ness Brown. This was marketed as an alien, like the Alien movie type sci-fi horror, and the main character was compared to Ripley from Alien, so I'm like, yes, Alien's one of my favorite movies of all time. I love Ripley's character. I love alien horror. Let's go. And I was so bored with this novella. It was so boring. I did not like the lead character at all. I mentioned this in one of my wrap-ups. The author talked about this character's braids so many times that I thought it was gonna give her superpowers at one point. I don't know why she felt the need to talk about her hair all the time. It was irritating, and then it wrapped up very quickly at the end, and I just didn't like it. A lot of people love this, but I just was like, this should not be compared. I mean, it had an alien in it. That's about, and an android. I think it was an android. That actually was the best part of the book, the little android thing. That was the best part. Other than that, I was terribly bored, so very bummed about that. Still looking for a good alien horror. Still searching. Number 6 is In Nightfall by Suzanne Young. This book, I was so excited to read it. It was so promising. It was marketed as a Lost Boys retelling, Lost Boys as in the movie, one of my favorite of all time. Very excited to read it, and it was not good. So they flipped the characters. Main character is female, and then she's got her brother. And then instead of the grandfather, it's the grandmother, and then instead of the mom, it's the dad. So the dad who's single and moving back home to his mom's house, which is fine. I was fine with that. But the vampires are like these terrible cliche, like mean girl, not even creepy vampires, and I was, again, very bored, and the characters, the main two characters, the brother and sister, were just not very smart, putting themselves in situations that were very obviously dumb, and yeah, the ending was lame. I mean, the best part about this book was the grandmother. She was funny, but other than that, it was just a super letdown. Super letdown. I had so much potential, and it just, no, it wasn't good. Number 5, it's 2 Minutes with the Devil by Matt McKelly. This is another novella that just didn't hit the mark for me either. This one is about, it's set in the 80s, so I love that already, and it's about a group of like young boys, kind of a little bit of a coming of age situation, and their, you know, innocence, and there's a cute little like first love situation that's described in it that was cute. I think this book was, or novella, was well written, I will say that. It just didn't deliver what I was expecting. So the premise is there's this like game that these kids play called 2 Minutes with the Devil, which is similar to like Bloody Mary, where you close your eyes and if you open your eyes, the devil appears. In this story, kids start disappearing. The group of boys, they try to, one of their friends I think ends up disappearing, and they try to figure out what is going on, like what's killing all of their friends and these young people. What I wanted didn't happen. I didn't really like the ending. I was really let down, and yeah, I was bummed about the direction that this one went into, which is purely my opinion. Some people really loved this novella, but I just wanted something a little bit different, and it didn't happen, so very disappointed. Number 4 is The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. I read this during fall. I wanted something that was going to give me all the fall vibes. This book was on so many people's fall book recommendations, which I don't really know why, because I'm pretty sure it takes place in the summer. I guess because it had like witchy vibes to it, but yeah, it did not land for me at all. This is the second Shay Earnshaw book that's done that for me. I loved Wild Places, whatever her other book was loving it. Fast-paced, and we get to the ending, and it was a complete letdown when certain things were revealed. I was not happy with the ending in that book, and exact same thing with this one. So in this book, we are following a young woman who lives like kind of on a little island with a lighthouse, and she manages the lighthouse. Her father's been missing. She lives with her mother, who's depressed. She's still in high school. I can't remember if she's a senior or not, but in this town many years ago, 3 women were in town. They were seducing all the men and married men, and so the town folk got together and were like, they must be witches because these men just can't control themselves around these women. So they drown these 3 women, and every year after that, they come back on land and they possess a young woman. And that young woman, while she's possessed, ends up killing some of the local boys. And this goes on for decades. And the town knows about it. It's cool. They're fine with it. It's a whole celebration. There's bonfires on the night that it's supposed to happen. And I'm like, what? So a tourist comes, and tourists come to celebrate this thing, and a tourist comes, and he is the only one who seems to have any common sense, because he asks, why do you guys do this? You know this is gonna happen, people are dying, like, why don't you stop it? And the main character is constantly trying to explain it away. She obviously has secrets. It goes from there. The ending, I was, again, so let down by this ending. I did not like the direction that it went into. I wanted more of the witches, and why they were doing what they were doing was very stupid to me. So yeah, another why do I keep wanting to call it her Shea Earnshaw disappointment. It sucks because her writing is really good. I mean, obviously I haven't DNF'd her books, but the way she ends her books, it's very frustrating. So another super disappointing read for me. Number 3 is You're Not Supposed to Be Here by Kaylin Bayron, and another book that had a fantastic premise that sounded so cool, and I couldn't wait to read it, and it was super let down. So in this book, we are following a young woman who works at this place in the summer that they reenact like a very popular scary movie. So think Friday the 13th, like Camp Crystal Lake. And the actors or the workers that work on this camp actually get to engage with people that pay money to try to be like the final girl or reenact these scenes. And they can touch you and push you and get physical with you. And people pay for this. And I'm like, that sounds so cool. I would never do it, but that sounds so cool. They're kind of wrapping up the summer. I think there's like one last group that's coming, so they're getting ready, and the main character realizes that some of her co-workers have disappeared. So she thinks they've just gone home for the summer. They don't want to deal with like the cleanup and everything. She works with her little group to get ready for this last group that's coming in, and it goes from there, and they realize people are being killed, and I was thinking that it was gonna be some, I don't wanna spoil it. I was thinking one thing, and it ended up being something else, and I don't want to say what, yeah, there's a part of it where I was like, what? It just, yeah, it didn't do what I wanted it to do. It had so much potential. This could have been a 5-star. This is a teen like slasher book, and it just didn't deliver. So yeah, another disappointing read. Number 2 is Confessions by Kanai Minato. When I tell you this book was on my most anticipated reads for 2023, everyone talked about it last year. It was like this amazing thriller. It was on everyone's like top 10 books of last year. It's not even a new book. I think it came out in like 2014 or something. It's an older book. It is translated. And I was like, what? I don't see what everybody, like I'm reading it and I was so bored. So let's talk about what it's about. We are following a teacher whose young daughter was murdered, and she is giving her last lecture to her students, and she tells them, I know 2 of you have murdered my daughter. I am going to seek revenge. So it's like a revenge tale, which I'm all about. Love a good revenge tale. And the weapon that she uses to try and get back at these 2 students, I did not like. I did not like it all. I'm not going to say what it is, because that is probably the biggest part of this book that I guess everybody was so in love with, but I did not like it at all. And then it goes from there. She kind of leaves you on this cliffhanger after her lecture, and then we go into each character's point of view. There's like 6 of them, and it's very repetitive and super boring. And I finished that book and I was like, I do not know why everyone loved this so much. But it's just me. It's just me. So if you've got this book on your TBR, go ahead and give it a try and come back here and let me know how you liked it, because I would be very interested to hear. But I was very let down by this one. I did not like it at all. And my number 1 worst, most disappointing read of the year is Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Yes, this is getting the coveted number 1 spot. This book was way too damn long. It was all over the place. It was boring at parts. The relationship between Violet and Xaden was super irritating. The arguments and the reason for the arguments, so many things. that was just not good in this book. And I have a whole vlog for it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, and it's also a sequel, so I don't want to get into it too much, but it is a sequel to Fourth Wing, where we have Violet. She is thrown into a situation where she has to become a dragon rider, and she goes to this school. Her mom is like the general or like the head person of this school or society or whatever. I can't even think of the words right now. And Violet was initially supposed to become a scribe, so more like a scholarly position. But she's tossed into this dragon riding school, and she becomes pretty good in it. Fourth Wing, I'm still standing on. I gave it a solid 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I thought it was very entertaining. Not perfect, but it kept my interest, and I really enjoyed it. I also loved the little romance that was in it, and until it got to the end of Fourth Wing, and I was hoping it wasn't going to progress the conflict that they had at the end of Fourth Wing, and it did progress and continue in Iron Flame. So it just made this book really hard to read. So in Iron Flame, they like go off on like these random missions that end up not really feeling like it's moving the plot along, and a lot of characters are introduced that don't really have any meaning to the plot either. The only thing that saved this book was the ending for me. The ending I was very surprised on, and is the only reason I'm going to read the next book. Hopefully the next book is not just Violet's point of view, because that was another huge issue. You are literally in Violet's head for, I don't know, was this 600, 700 pages, and it was not good. My worst read of 2023. So now we're going to talk about all the books that I DNF'd in 2023. This is going to be like rapid fire. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. I'm just going to say the name, the author, the genre, and a little brief reason why I DNF'd it. First up is Flawless by Elsie Silver. This is a romance, very well loved romance. I think it's part of a trilogy, and I did not like it at all. We are following a rodeo or bull rider, and he is the bad boy. He keeps getting in trouble with his publicist. He's sponsored by a milk company, but he doesn't like milk, and that's like a whole thing in the beginning of this book, which I found dumb. And so the publicist's daughter is told to go live with him, stay with him, watch him, babysit him, to keep him on the straight and narrow, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. 5-Star Weekend by Erin Hildebrand. This is like one of those summer reads that take place in like the Hamptons or Nantucket that I usually really enjoy, but in this case, this one had a very depressing tone to it. Main character is a widow. She doesn't have any friends. She's trying to gather, do this like 5-star weekend where she gathers friends from each like generation of her life, like childhood, teen years, college, etc. And she wanted to bring them to like her beach house. And it was just depressing. You know, she's a widow, so she's dealing with that. And then one of the friends has breast cancer, and for a summer read, I just couldn't do that. So DNF. Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I generally like her books typically, but this one I just could not deal with. The main character has this issue where she morphs into whoever she's around. She like tries to make her personality what the other person wants her to be. I don't like that at all. She is working as kind of like an escort, not with the sex, but like fake dating for certain people that need like a fake date. And in this situation, her fake date's brother is onto her, feels like there's something she's hiding, and then they end up working together. So these all Ali Hazelwood books take place in like the STEM field. So I just didn't like the writing in this one. The way Ali Hazelwood continuously described the male character as being large and filling door frames, and his forearms were so big and his hands were big, and it was just like too much. So DNF. My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. Very boring. Had a great premise. 18th century vampire rents out a room to a young woman who needs a room immediately for a very cheap price. She moves in. She starts seeing weird stuff going on. Wonders what's wrong with her roommate. He's a vampire. He needs help kind of getting used to modern times. There was no chemistry with these two characters. There was a scene, and I talked about this in my wrap-up, but there was a scene where she's teaching him how to order coffee at a coffee shop. It should have been like a paragraph. It was like 10 pages, and I was done at that point, so DNF. It felt like 10 pages. I don't know. Next up is Just Don't Fall by Emma St. Clair. This was a book that I wanted to read during the fall because I hoped it would have a lot of fall vibes, and it didn't have fall vibes. I think it mentioned fall like one time, and then it also ended up being a never been kissed trope, which I have no desire to read, and so I quickly DNF'd that book. Another fall book that I was hoping to read and enjoy and get the fall vibes was Fall into Temptation by Lucy Score, and this book was very insta-love. We're following a single mom, moves into this, like I think he's the mayor of the town, moves into his like little house thing that he's renting in the back of his house, and she's like a yoga teacher. They bump into each other. It's very insta-love immediately, and I couldn't do it, so DNF. I did read her Christmas book though, and what was that called? The Christmas Fix, and I did like that one, but did not like this fall book. The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. A lot of people really love this book. For me, I was incredibly bored. This is about a woman who's, all of the women in her family are cursed, and she is at the age where things are starting to happen to her. She's hallucinating. This had like kind of like a time travel situation. I think it was supposed to have like a romance as well, but it took so long to get to the point where I was even remotely entertained, and then I got to a point where I was like, I literally don't care what happens to any of these characters, so DNF that one. A lot of these are romances, I'm realizing. It wasn't a good year for romances in me. Next up, Not the Witch You Wed by April Asher. This was a kind of like a Halloween spooky witch paranormal romance, and another insta-love situation where I couldn't deal with it. These two main characters actually knew each other before, and I think he was like a male wolf shifter. He broke her, she's a witch, broke her heart, and so she's all bitter, and they somehow have to fake date because in their world you had to like mate or bond by a certain time. I don't know. I DNF'd it. I didn't even get that far because I don't like insta-love. Not all the time. Like, there's some situations where if it's written really well and there's like angstiness, then I'm fine with it, but the way that these books had insta-love, I couldn't do it. Wreck the Halls by Tessa Bailey. Pretty sure this will be my last Tessa Bailey book. Didn't care about the premise. Two children of two former rock stars need to get together to try to get their parents back to making music again or whatever. It's marketed as a Christmas romance, and I don't think it really mentioned Christmas at all, and I had no desire to read about these kids trying to get their parents back to, or adult children trying to get their parents back to the music scene. Didn't care, so DNF. The Holiday Mix-Up by Ginny Baird, also another Christmas romance. Didn't have much Christmas vibes going on. This is a retelling of While You Were Sleeping, which is the movie with Sandra Bullock, and I didn't like it. I didn't like this at all. So it follows the premise where the female lead, she's obsessed with this guy. He propositions her to be his fake date for his family's Christmas. Shenanigans, and then he gets hit by a bus, ends up in the hospital. She meets his whole family. They take her in because, oh, this is so-and-so's girlfriend now. Let's welcome her to the family while he's recovering in a coma. And then the brother comes in and is like already swooning over this woman who is your brother's supposed girlfriend. I couldn't do it. I'm sorry, DNF. For You and Only You by Caroline Kepnes. This is the series, the You series, that was a show on Netflix with Joe. He is a serial killer. I've loved pretty much all of the books up until this one. This one is very repetitive, super boring. Joe is in a academic setting, like at a college, and his inner monologue usually is what carries me through these books, and in this specific one, it was incredibly convoluted and boring, and his love interest, or the person he was obsessing over, was not interesting, and I think this might be the last book that I read in this series because Joe just needs to retire at this point. I couldn't do it. It didn't give me the serial killer vibes, the stalker vibes. It was just not good, so DNF. And the last book that I DNF'd is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones, a very well-loved book that I just could not get into. This is a slasher. Main character is obsessed with horror books, which I thought I was going to love, but she talks about them so much, and it's so long, and she goes off on these tangents, and I was getting very bored. I wanted more of the story. She's half Native American. There's some potential for some good social commentary, which I'm understanding was in this book, but I couldn't even get into it long enough to get to that part. So the beginning of the book was very good. There were some deaths in it, and I was interested, and then we follow her along. I can't remember her character's name. I have a feeling she does have some like deep issues that she was dealing with too, because her father was an alcoholic and her mom was just not around, so I'm assuming her character did have some some flaws and issues that she was dealing with that probably would have been very interesting to read about, but I just couldn't get past all of her tangents. It just got super repetitive and boring, so DNF. There it is, another year done. All of my disappointing worst reads and DNFs, and I hope this list is much smaller in 2024. I hope you guys have a wonderful reading year in 2024 as well, and wishing for very minimal DNFs and a short worst and disappointing list for next year. As always, thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you guys again soon.